One of the myths that non-UUs believe about Unitarian Universalists are that we are wishy-washy in our values. That myth is not only annoying, but it hurts. It hurts us when we are trying to attract new members to our religion, and it hurts me personally. After all, I do not think of myself as wishy-washy. And I believe that part of the reason that I am not wishy-washy is that I was raised Unitarian Universalist with Unitarian Universalist values. It is untrue that we are wishy-washy. What is true is that Unitarian Universalists keep learning and finding out what is true their whole lives. We get that from our fourth principle, which is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. So sometimes when we learn something new, the knowledge may lead us to change our opinion about a position we are taking. Being able to learn and grow is human. If we are lucky, we change and we grow throughout our whole lives. On the other hand, we don't really drastically change our fundamental values. If we stay true to our 7 principles, we will never hold certain values as a guide. For example, we are not likely to become undemocratic in our thinking because our 5th principle is the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregations and society at large. The 7 principles are a guide for our values. Even though we can vary slightly in what our values are, by large, our values are consistent with each other. Because all of us use the same guide in our lives, we are not afraid to explore new ideas or other religions because we feel firm in our values. We are not afraid to test out values because they exist within the framework of our 7 principles. We also have some myths about ourselves. For example, we believe our faith is very different from other faiths. We laugh and clap during worship. We are very talented. We are okay with doubt. We are accepting of LGBT people. We are all college educated. While it is certainly true that many Unitarian Universalists are educated, or that many Unitarian youth go directly to college, there are also many of us who do not fit that stereotype. Many of my Unitarian friends feel this pressure from not only their families, but from their congregations. They are being asked what college they will attend, as opposed to the more neutral question, what their plans are for when they finish high school. Of course, we all know there are other churches that laugh and clap during worship. We are also not the only ones who to be accepting of all kinds of different people. We truly bask in our diversity and our uniqueness. So as young as I am, I see us being misjudged from the outside. And I also see us being misjudged by ourselves. Both are annoying in different ways.
Today's probably a good day for somebody who wants to learn about Unitarian Universalism, since we're talking a little bit about things that people believe about us that are not true. My myth busting goes back to a personal experience. Like Bibi, this is the only religion I remember ever belonging to. And this goes back to very, very, very early childhood. It's just that my experience goes a little further back in time than Bibi's. But in the 1990s, I was part of a congregation in Palatine, Illinois. It was called Countryside Church, a Unitarian Universalist congregation there. And during that time, living in Chicago, they had a wonderful public radio station. And they also had a competition there for local stand-up comedians. And determine who's the best local stand-up comedian. And the winner was a young man named Aaron Freeman. And Jane and I subsequently went to see him in a local theater production called Do the White Thing, which was an extended improvisation with Aaron and a white actor who played a libertarian street musician of all things. And Aaron is black and the musician was white, and the content was topical and very humorous. And perhaps as a result of his success in that competition and in the local theater, Aaron soon had his own local radio show on WBEZ, the public radio. And it was on Saturday mornings, and it was a few hours long. This show included people dropping in. One of them was Jim Naylor, who had his annoying music segment, and which later became a show on its own and then disappeared, kind of like a shooting star. But Aaron's musings about the news during the day, he would kind of go through the headlines, and then also he took calls from people. Now, during the course of listening to his show, as I did many, many weekends, I learned that he had converted to Judaism. He was black, converted to Judaism. He claimed that he voted for Ronald Reagan because he thought Reagan would be a boon to comedy. Maybe that's the reason he converted to Judaism also. But the real point of me telling you about all this is because of the call-in part of his show. As most hosts, Aaron asked the callers questions about themselves, as well as, why are you calling in? And this one particular morning, a woman on the other end of the line, among other facts, disclosed that she is a Unitarian Universalist. Aaron was very quick-witted, interjected something like, "Oh, religion light, ha ha." And the caller laughed, and I can't recall exactly how she responded, but I felt myself getting a little angry. To me, the message was clear. We're not a real religion. You don't have to take us seriously. We have no real message, and you might as well ignore us because it's as if we're not really there. Good taste, less filling, religion light. So as annoyed as I was with Aaron Freeman's remark, something occurred later that annoyed me even more. When I mentioned Freeman's remark to people at our church, Unitarian Universalist Church, some of them thought it was funny and liked being referred to as a religion that is light. Now, I know I'm somewhat in a minority when it comes to being a UU, inasmuch I'm not a refugee from another religion that came here with, baggage about heavy dogma and, weighty and oppressive way of thinking. And I'm proud of the fact that we're not a religion that starts out with a lot of axiomatic taboos and a priori beliefs that must be adhered to. But to say that we're lightweight, that seemed to be going a bit too far. So let's break down the myths inherent in painting Unitarian Universalism with the lightweight label. We can believe anything we want to. That's one of the myths. The second myth, UU religion does not require anything of us other than to sign the book and contribute financially. Our lives otherwise are untouched by what we discuss or do here. We have a religion with no obligations. So first of all, let's talk briefly about the myth that we can believe anything we want to. Bibi already touched on the fact that we have principles and purposes. And we've mentioned that adopting beliefs in direct contradiction to our principles is not something that we do on a whim. But besides that, can anyone truly believe anything they want to believe? For instance, can you believe that this world is a totally safe and peaceful place? Can you believe that you can jump off the top of the Sears Tower and land safely? We don't believe what we want to believe. We believe what we must. based on our experience and our worldview. This particular myth may have its roots in one of the oldest principles of Unitarian Universalist thinking, and that is the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. This freedom is the freedom to follow the trail for truth and meaning wherever it may lead, even in contradiction to long-held beliefs or concepts that were once thought axiomatic and could be interpreted incorrectly as the ability to believe whatever you want to believe. But it leaves out a very important element. This element is the element of reason and conscience. The free and responsible search for truth and meaning is guided by human reason. Unitarian Universalism is not usually described as a religion founded on faith, but truth be told, there is a fundamental faith in human reason at the root of Unitarian Universalist thinking that keeps a free and responsible search for truth and meaning from becoming a faith that lets one believe whatever. So let's look at the second myth, inherent in the acceptance of Unitarian Universalism as religion light. Unitarian Universalism is a religion without obligations other than to sign the book and support your congregation financially. Now, those are very important things to do. I'm not saying that they're not. We are a congregation-based religion, born of the congregationalist religious movement. So part of being a Unitarian Universalist is, by definition, joining a congregation. And so is recognizing that the congregation needs your financial support to persist, needs my financial support to persist. You might even say that the recognition of the need for financial support grows out of our faith in human reason. It just makes sense. My reason tells me this congregation will not survive through divine intervention. But what does our religion require of us besides financial support and joining a congregation? Well, we're not a religion of orthodoxy. We're not based on dogma, but we are based on covenant. If you look at the front of the gray hymnal, the words are, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote." We have a covenant also for this congregation, and for years in Illinois, we repeated the covenant. If asked, I can still recite the covenant from our UU Church in Palatine by heart. We unite to affirm the kinship of all people and to promote life's creating, transforming, and healing power through worship, study, and service. What do all of these covenants have in common? They are, by definition, promises we make to each other and to the world. As a matter of fact, when I was in a Unitarian church as a boy, the covenant would end with the words, "Thus do we covenant with each other and with God." These are ways that we have obligated ourselves in how we will behave and act with one another and with people outside the congregation as well. These are obligations about who we are. In many congregations, the covenant of the congregation is read aloud in unison by the congregation at every worship service. And we read our covenant at the beginning of every worship associate meeting. But having a covenant is more than reading it every week. Indeed, it demands that we behave and act in accordance with it. As a member of this community, we should always feel comfortable asking if a decision we are making is in accordance with our covenant, and should be ready to examine our own actions to determine if they are in accordance with the covenant, whether we are specifically asked to do so or not. It is always a fair question to raise and is never out of order. Does a religion light require the members of its congregations to be ready to examine their actions and behaviors and answer the question, does this action or decision reflect our covenant? To me, one of the implications of religion light is that it is more like a study group, a class, or perhaps a lecture series. You may have rules when participating in the activity, but once outside of that activity, you're free of those rules. For example, in our book discussion group, we have rules about how we will do the assigned readings and attempt to make all the discussion meetings and how the actual discussion will be carried out. And for the most part, we follow those rules when in the book discussion meeting. But the rules don't carry outside the meeting. Many of our rules are good practices, but I'm not obligated by those rules if I meet a friend at lunch to discuss a book we're both reading. Our covenant is not a covenant about how we'll behave while we're present in the congregation and then forgotten when we go on about our daily lives. True, being here in this community, practicing our covenant takes on a special meaning because we've agreed together to be bound by it and we have adopted it. But when I'm not here, I'm relating to people who have made no such overt and specific obligation to me. But does that mean that I should no longer act with love in my heart? Should I stop welcoming the stranger? Should I stop honoring diversity? Absolutely not. I've made a promise. I've obligated myself with this community. I've engaged in covenant. These obligations, those acts, that behavior does not grow from religion light. We are a real religion, one that engages in the whole person and not just who we are when we are here or in a church-related activity. And there's also a couple of other myths I want to go into while I'm at it, and they're kind of unrelated to the religion light comment. First of all, Unitarian Universalists cannot be Christians. Well, yeah, it's sort of true if you have a specific and strict definition of Christian. For example, some fundamentalist Christians do not consider Catholics or Mormons to be Christians. But if you allow that not all Christians agree on what it means to be Christian, and that there may be some minimal definition that describes some Unitarian Universalists as Christians, then yes, of course, there are some Unitarian Universalists who are Christian. For example, I have a friend who became a Unitarian Universalist minister, and he's actually retired now, but still active in the tradition. He blogs, he tweets about Unitarian Universalism and about politics. And he calls himself a Unitarian Universalist Christian. Oddly enough, I rarely discuss religion with him, so I cannot say specifically how he defines his Christianity, but I can guess it would not be exactly the same as believing that the one and only true path to salvation is through acceptance of Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. First of all, he's very smart, and I'm sure that he knows that belief in one and only true path to salvation is dogma, and he knows that our religion is non-dogmatic. So it is probably more personal than that statement of belief, and involves his own personal path to redemption and meaning. Another myth is the myth that because we are considered a liberal religion, that one must be liberal politically as well. While many of us are politically liberal, not all of us are. And political leaning is not and never has been a bar to being a Unitarian Universalist, nor is it a requirement for being one. While there are some positions that are taken by political parties that at least appear to be in direct contradiction to our principles, it's not fair to paint all non-liberal political philosophies as antithetical to Unitarian Universalism. Similar to the myth that Unitarian Universalists can believe anything they want to, I think this myth also has its origin in Unitarian history. And when I was an adolescent, I belonged to the Unitarian Youth Group. We were called LRY, which stood for Liberal Religious Youth. And I remember that one of our jokes at the time is that maybe we should just change it from LRY to LY, because as young people, we're probably more happy being called liberal than being religious. But even that definition did not mean liberal in the political sense, but rather more in the historical sense. One of our core tenets was that it's acceptable practice to question traditional values and beliefs. So a liberal religion is one that's not afraid to question traditional values. Liberal politics has changed definition over the years. Currently, it seems to be associated with the belief that the government is an acceptable vehicle to solve societal problems. And conservative political thinking is that government should be the solution of last resort. Now, sometimes the conservative thinking is such that it considers the problem only important if it can be resolved by non-governmental means, but not all conservatives believe that. Some liberal political thinkers believe that government is the preferred method to solve all problems, but not all liberal political thinkers agree with that. So if you look at the Unitarian Universalist principles, not all of them apply to liberal religious thinking directly. The interdependent web of all existence could have come out of a Buddhist way of thinking, or perhaps an ecologist view of the world. But neither of those are by necessity liberal in the sense that they question and challenge tradition. The challenge that does seem to relate directly to a definition of Unitarian Universalist religion as liberal religion is our free and responsible search for truth and meaning, to be willing to follow that bravely and courageously and with commitment wherever it may lead. So we have to acknowledge that there are several myths or misconceptions about Unitarian Universalist religion. And I've really just touched on a few of them. Liberal religion does not equal liberal politics. Unitarian Universalists can be, and some are, Christian, and Unitarian Universalism is definitely not religion light. Though not dogmatic, we do obligate ourselves in several ways to live out our Unitarian Universalist values.